Welcome to the Online Success Journey podcast, your opportunity to discover and learn from entrepreneurs like yourself. This is not your typical podcast, but a place where you can get the real story and find out how real people encounter speed bumps and detours, but journey through to find success. Now here's your host for the Online Success Journey podcast, Patience.
Hello everyone and welcome to Online Success Journey. This is episode 199. Are you ready to join the clan? Today we have Jerry Brazie, a husband, a father, entrepreneur who comes from a family of 9 brothers, sisters, with Jerry being a child number 7. Determined to work it out of his surroundings, Jerry worked more than 20 jobs before starting his first business at the age of 28. Over the last 20 years, his companies have generated over $450 million in revenue and a lifetime of experience. A serial entrepreneur, Jerry has now made his mission to educate others that grew up like him, teaching that there is opportunity and hope if you are willing to do what it takes. Hello, Jerry.
Patience, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you for coming. I know the clan is anxious to hear your story, so let's get started with the basics. Can you tell my clan a little bit about your background, about what you did before you started your own online business?
Sure, and I appreciate you having me on and giving me a chance to tell my story. I have 8 brothers and sisters, so I come from a huge family, and my parents had 6 kids by the time that they were 22 years old. So I have 6 older brothers and sisters that are less than a year apart on average, if you can imagine that. And then 7 years later, I came along. They kind of had me by accident and didn't want me to be an only child. So I have a little brother and a little sister. So there was 9 of us. And I come from a very, very humble background and a poor background where we struggled up until essentially I got my own job. And I have a little brother, like I said, and a little sister. My little brother's 20 months younger than I am. And so we were a couple of partners in crime, if you will, and it wasn't uncommon for us to spend our time, finding food, if you will, at the local market without the without the ability to pay for it, because that was just kind of the nature of how we grew up. So my background is that I was a very poor kid, came off of the streets of Portland, and grew up kind of not having any direction or any idea about what I wanted to do. And ultimately, the entrepreneurial bug that I got hit because, from my perspective, I was an independent kid. So the pieces of being an entrepreneur, I can look back on that now and say that were planted in me by the experiences I had as a child, that independence that was put on me at a very, very young age. My brother and I, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, it wasn't uncommon for us to take the city buses across town. There were what we would call latchkey kids. Nobody was watching us. My mother worked multiple jobs, was rarely ever around. And so you have to make do for yourself as best you can. And when you learn to do that independently, then it, I think, has a big benefit later in life relative to the independence that is needed to really be in business and be on your own. So as a kid, it was, the other thing I will say about being poor is you never know you're poor when you're a kid. And as a kid, it teaches you lessons without all of the animosity that you might have about being poor. By the time you get to be 12 or 13 or 14 years old and you start to compare yourself to your peers, you have some sense of it. But life in general was just life to me when I was a kid going through that. And so for me, getting my first job when I was 11 years old seemed like the natural thing to do. I paid taxes as an 11-year-old, if you can believe that, and never have not had a job since, and I've never missed a day of work since, because I always equate work and food. Those two things go together. If I went to my first job they gave me a meal at the end of the day, and I would have worked all day for that meal, right? That I would have done that for free to get that. I remember exactly what it was, too. This is a story I tell all the time, Patience. It was a club sandwich, chicken and turkey and ham on a sourdough bread and a big bunch of fries, French fries right in the middle. And I don't know that I had French fries 2 or 3 times up to that point in my life. So, I mean, it was a real treat. And I had to put in the 8 hours just to get that sandwich, let alone the fact that they paid me, $2.35 an hour. So that my background up until I was 16 or 17 years old was really one of just kind of living through that existence. And then when I was 17, I was on the streets. Just after I turned 16, I was on the streets. And as I've said, I I lived in a what we would call Skid Row hotel for $25 a week with a shared bathroom on a single floor, and I was the only one that wasn't a heroin addict or a hooker. And so I would literally get up out of that and go to work every single day. No education, but I knew how to work. And so from that, I just continued to take jobs until ultimately I got to be 21 years old, and I landed a job at a courier company because I wanted to take the job as driving. And I did that for 7 years and made it to 28 years old. And that's when I decided to go out on my own and become an entrepreneur.
Wow. What is the most dangerous belief an online entrepreneur can have?
That is, for me, I think there's a lot of answers to that question, but and every entrepreneur is going to give you a different answer, I think, what they should be concerned about. But mine is the state of entrepreneurship today. The most dangerous is not understanding what being an entrepreneur is. This belief that entrepreneurship is something that you can do for 2 hours a day and get rich and have $5,000 in passive income without spending the time that's needed. Entrepreneurship really, for me, has been mischaracterized, particularly here in the States, and I'm going to guess around the world, but particularly here in the States, it's mischaracterized as these unicorn companies that we see like Facebook and YouTube, Google, all of these young, rich billionaires that create these apps, and then they're held up by media and popular culture as the example of what an entrepreneur is, and it makes it look easy, and it makes it look like something that you can do when you're young. And the reality is the other side of it, which is very, very different from what is held up. I mean, for every one app that makes it, I think there's something like 4,000. There's some giant number of apps that fail to every one that works. And then for every one that works, it's every 10,000 that actually make money and take off. So the numbers are against you, and the reality is that the time and the effort that you have to put into being an entrepreneur is significant. And so I think that we've done a disservice to our kids. Then by kids, I mean anybody in their 20s that's looking to become an entrepreneur, by selling them this bill of goods, this example that you can do things that just aren't possible, that, from my opinion, can't be made. The 4-hour work week, as an example, is where I push back on that, and I say, as an entrepreneur, I never met anybody who works 4-hour work weeks. In fact, I belong to a CEO group, and I belonged to them for 20 years, and it's full. There's probably been 30 CEOs over the years, and these are mostly guys that built their companies from zero, from scratch, and turned them into multi-million-dollar per year revenue producing companies, and in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And those guys, there's a few guys in there that were CEOs for family money or for investment companies, but largely it's self-made people that started their companies from scratch. And I don't know a single one of them that only works, what is that? The book is
4-hour week.
Yeah, 4-hour work weeks. I don't know a single one of them that's ever done that. And this is over 20 years. Everybody works 10 hours a day at a minimum, particularly in the early years. Some of these companies are pretty mature now. They've been 20, 25 years old. But particularly in those early years, you have to put in the effort and the time, and it takes a massive amount of energy. And so back to your question, the dangerous belief an entrepreneur can have is that you just don't understand what an entrepreneur is and what the commitment is to being an entrepreneur, because you can go online all of the time. You can go on YouTube videos and watch these crazy videos about how people can make money without putting in any effort, and they'll have guys with Lamborghinis sitting back behind them that's illustrating that, and what you don't know is that's just a background that he's generated on his computer of a Lamborghini. And the reality is, to earn enough money to buy a Lamborghini takes an inordinate amount of work for most everybody. Again, what they call the unicorns, or these companies and these people that just take off, and they have very, very abnormal results relative to what the rest of people will experience for business. Doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means the chances are few and far between, and that if you want to start your own business, if you want to get online and put a business together online, the rules are exactly the same online as they are in the world, right? In the analog and the digital take the same amount of effort and energy and time and risk. And you have to be patient, and you have to put in the effort. All of those things are relative. It doesn't matter if it's online or offline. It's all takes time, and it all takes a commitment. And that misunderstanding as an entrepreneur, I think, continues to have and is going to have significant ramifications, not least of which is that we are seeing this play out, I believe, by the suicide rates that we're seeing in young entrepreneurs. So young business owners are getting into the game, and they're realizing that it will beat you up. I mean, it is literally survival of the fittest out here, and this game will beat you up. And if you're not aware and ready for what's coming, I think if you've not prepared for the trip, you can't ever understand it. You have to live through it. But if you're not prepared for what's going to come, the result can be terrifying. And I can see where it would push people to do things that they otherwise would not do negatively, like seeing things as terrible as suicide rates going up. So I think this is more than just an opinion on entrepreneurship. I think there's some backup to that and things that we need to be careful of. And we're seeing that manifest itself, like I said, in the younger generation as they get into entrepreneurship, and it just crushes them. And they go, wait a second, wait, I wasn't ever told this. Nobody ever explained this to me. It's not as easy as just clicking a few links and setting up a web page and people are going to come, and they just realize, I quit my job to do this, and all of a sudden I don't have a job anymore and I have no income, and it wasn't supposed to be this difficult. So I really hammer this point home as much as I can, that the most dangerous belief you can have as an entrepreneur is that being an entrepreneur is somehow easy or quick, or there's a quick way to get rich, either online or offline as an entrepreneur, because in fact, the exact opposite is true. And I know a lot of people that own media companies and web companies. I know a lot of people that are in those spaces, and guess what? They work harder than I do, and I work pretty hard. So I would say that's the most dangerous belief an entrepreneur can have, is that it's easy and that they don't understand what will be expected of them.
Why do you do what you do?
Good question. As a poor kid, when you are growing up, and this was true in the 70s when I grew up, the 70s and the 80s, and I think it's even more true today. We are constantly being told, well, let me back up, survival. So as a kid, when I got to go to work as an 11-year-old, as I told earlier how I grew up, as I got to be a kid and 11 and I took my first job and they gave me that sandwich that I would have worked all day for free, I realized that work equaled food. And so really work equaled survival. And I was able to survive. And that kind of was and indelibly lodged into my head and inextricably linked together, those two things, work and food. And food is survival. So for me, it was really about surviving, is why I did what I did as a young person up until my 20s. And then at 28, I had the opportunity to start my own company. And that was just a natural progression for me of where I came from to where I was going to go. That independent spirit I talked about earlier kind of drove me to go and be independent and be a risk taker. And that to me feels natural. It feels right that, when you're living on the streets as a 17-year-old and you're staring up at the rest of the world and you have no expectations and nobody's giving you any direction and you have no way to go. And now juxtapose that with 12 years later, and I'm starting my own business. That independence and those lessons that I learned by being at the bottom and being on the street only pushed me to achieve more when that opportunity came. So that would be one reason why I do what I do, is I feel compelled, even at 50 years old, to continue to push that. I think I'm going to be out of business every single day. I think one of the reasons I've been successful in business is because every day I come to work, I don't take it for granted, and I worry about being out of business at the end of every day. So it pushes you to be better. But in addition to that, back to my original point, when you grow up the way that I did in the 70s and 80s, and I think it's even worse today, everything and everybody around you tells you that you can't make it, tells you that you can't get there. We're constantly preached to that there's some invisible hand that's holding you down and keeping you back. And it gives you an excuse and a reason and something to point at for why you're not doing what you're supposed to do, or you're not being successful the way that you should be. And I want to say, patience, when I define success, for me, coming from where I come from, I have people who are my age that have 3 and 4 generations of children already. So you're talking about what I call institutional poverty that just never changes. And it goes from grandparents to parents to people my age, and now their kids, or now their grandkids, and having children at 16, and their kids have kids at 16, and that cycle just never stops. Well, you're told it's not your fault. You're told that there's a reason why this cycle never stops. You're told that you can't be successful, and then successful is held up to you as this go buy a Lamborghini, ultra rich, top 1/10 of 1%. And the reality is, for many of us, particularly me at that age, it was just going to work every day. Try to put 30 days together, and then try to put a year together, and try to survive and count that as a good day. And then once you've survived, try to get a meal. And if you got a meal, count yourself fortunate. And then pretty soon you got a job and it's steady and you can pay the bills regularly, and you've learned all those experiences, call yourself fortunate. And all of those lessons, all of that information that you're constantly being bombarded with, that it's not your fault, that you can't do it, that somebody else is keeping you down, that the government's holding you down, that, again, that invisible hand of some powerful banker or the boss is keeping you down, or your mom is keeping you down. There's always something. Your history's keeping you down, your legacy, your family, whatever it is that's keeping you down. You are indoctrinated into believing that. And I saw that firsthand in almost everybody that I grew up with. For me, I wanted more. I wanted something different. I wanted to get up and get out from where I was. I had no expectation of being rich. I don't want to make it sound like I did, because I had no expectation of being rich, but I wanted to know where my food was coming from tomorrow. And if I could get to where I knew where my food was coming from tomorrow, then, okay, I'm going to build on that. I call it it's just numbers. You start as a 1, you move to a 2, try to be a 3. And if you can get to a 3, 3's just going to work every day for a month. Set that goal for yourself. It's like when you diet, right? You can't lose 10 pounds in a day. It takes time to lose 10 pounds, and you have to teach yourself new lessons in order to lose 10 pounds. And I live by that. That's been the way that I have ran my life since I was old enough to kind of be in control of it, all the way through today. And it fires me. That's why I do what I do, is because I have that desire inside me that burns, that says, if you don't, you're not going to eat. Now, I'm far, far removed from any of that. I don't want to make it sound like it is, but I don't forget that. I don't forget those lessons. So I think that's why I do what I do.
Do you believe that anyone can be an entrepreneur, or are some people more cut out for it than others?
Oh, that's a great question, too. That, I don't think, it's funny that you do that, because just, and again, anybody can go to my Jerry Brazie Instagram, where we do little video snippets from our podcasts. And we covered this, I think, just 3 or 4 or 3 or 4 Instagram posts ago. So that's a great question. And really, it was in the context of, I think, somebody that was online, that's very popular online, had talked about entrepreneurs are born. It was his opinion that entrepreneurs are born. And I don't think entrepreneurs are born. I think entrepreneurs are made. I think that you can be made, because I had no concept. I didn't even know what the word entrepreneur, I got to think about this. I don't think I knew what entrepreneur meant till I was 30 years old. I don't know that I ever heard the word, right? You were a business owner. I don't know that I ever heard the word entrepreneur until I was in my 30s, and I'm 50 now. Maybe I did, but just as an example, it wasn't thrown around at all like it is today, and kind of what we covered earlier in What Are the Problems section. But anybody can become an entrepreneur in their own right. It can be small or it could be large. You just have to understand that you're going to have to go through some adversity, and you're going to get tested, and you're going to get pushed, and it's whether or not you can stand up to that stress, and you can make good decisions and survive making the mistakes, as to whether or not you can be an entrepreneur. The question is, can you be a successful entrepreneur? And there's no guarantee at that. But I will say, having said that an entrepreneur is absolutely made. I was made. I had no concept of what an entrepreneur was. I had no idea how business worked. I have zero education. I didn't know the first thing about balance sheets and profit and loss statements, taxes, interest rates, equity. I had no idea what any of those terms meant when I was 17, 18, 19 years old, and probably well into my 20s. And so I was absolutely made. I was made by the experiences I had as a kid, which we covered earlier. And then ultimately, as I began to put those experiences together and make mistakes working on my own and learn from those mistakes, and I continued to grow, that I achieved some success. But I will say, having said that anyone can do that, but I don't think everyone's cut out for it. And I think some people are better as a number two. I have some great people that work for me and have worked for me for 20, 25 years now. And they are absolutely fantastic. And they're fantastic as number twos because when it really comes, they probably feel the stress. And this is the downside to being a number two, I suppose, or a number three. At least for me, they have stress that I don't have, if you can believe it. So I'm the one that has to make all of the ultimate decisions. I'm the one risking everything. I have everything on the line relative to my house and my income and my assets and all the things that I've collateralized and just kind of the way that business works. But it's no cakewalk when you're number two or you're number three, and everything that you have and everything that you own and your whole life is wrapped up in the success of this business. And so it's not a get out of jail free card by being a number two or a number three. Sometimes it's easier to be the guy at the top, even though you're risking everything. And even though ultimately it comes down on top of you, at least you're responsible for what happens to you. If you're number two or you're number three, someone else is responsible for what happens to you. And that in itself is its own kind of stress. So I think it's a relative term, but ultimately I would say that anyone can learn to be an entrepreneur, but some people just aren't cut out to be entrepreneurs.
In your years in businesses, do you ever have a mentor or coach?
I do. I did, I should say. I actually had two, and I'll try to tell this real quickly. The main one, I got invited to join a CEO group that I alluded to earlier when right after I started my business. So I was 28 years old, maybe 29, and I got called by this person. Keith was his name, and he was a retired COO and CEO of Fortune 500 companies, and he had recently retired, and he had this group, which was essentially a CEO group of guys that got together, as I explained earlier, and they kind of serve as each other's boards. You get together for half a day or 3/4 of a day once a month, and you kind of talk about your businesses with everybody, and you throw questions back and forth and different scenarios, kind of serve, again, as a de facto board. And he was the head of this group. And then included in that is an hour or two with him one-on-one time. So you really get to pick his brain. And he died here last year at 86 years old, and he was a fantastic influence in my life. At the end, as he moved into a home and had quit the group for the last he's probably 83, he probably quit the group. So, for the last 3 years, his mind was going away, and he was kind of, getting worse on a regular basis. I would go pick him up once a month, and we would go to lunch. And towards the end, he's telling me the same World War II stories from when he grew up that I had heard the month before. But the thing was, after 20 years with him, the lessons that he had taught me just being with him and sitting across from him and entertaining him and letting him tell me these same stories that he had told me the month before incentivized me and inspired me to go out and to remember the lessons that he had taught me when his mind was not betraying him, and fired me back up to get out there and to go out and to work. And so that his mentorship over that 20 plus year relationship that I had with him was absolutely invaluable. And the thing about mentors is, and what I want people to hear me say, is that you can find them everywhere. You just have to go look. They're not going to come to you. You just have to go find them. And it doesn't matter if you're looking for somebody to mentor you. If somebody called me up asking me how to do better on a test in high school, I'm going to give them my opinion. If somebody called and asked me about what school they should go to or what education they should get, I'm going to give you my opinion. If you should take the job at Burger King or McDonald's, I'm going to give you my opinion. My opinion's McDonald's on that, by the way, because I learned a ton when I was 16 years old working at McDonald's. Lessons that I still use today in business, I learned when I was 16 years old. And so I will answer and help. Anybody can go to just email me at jerry@jerrybrazie.com. You can go to the Jerry Brazie website and contact us there. I'm happy to help, no matter what the question is, because I have this vast knowledge and all of this experience, and I want to share it. And most people like me are like that. They want to help. And so you don't have to worry about, oh, that guy's super successful or super rich, or he's done really well. He has nothing in common with me. Most all of us do. Most all of us came from the same places. We can help you avoid the pitfalls that we went through in the exact same scenario, or that we've seen in that exact same scenario through other people. And rarely is it that we don't or know someone who went through what you're going to experience or went through it ourselves. And we're always happy to help. But you got to ask. The question not asked never goes answered. And if you don't ask, you're not going to get that answer. So I would say mentors are absolutely important. And additionally, mentors are absolutely important to help you get through life's lessons a whole lot easier. I wish I had me when I was a kid. If I had somebody like me, my life would have been a whole lot easier than it was. But I can't underplay the importance of finding a good mentor, and then also understanding that people want to help generally. I know I do. I know all of the CEOs that I know do. There's nothing we like better than bringing a young kid in and helping him along and showing him the lessons and getting that feedback at the same time. You get that when you're 50 years old and you've been successful for 20 years, all of a sudden as you bring in the 25-year-old and he starts telling you his issues. You do everything you can not to go, those aren't issues. You say to yourself, and you try not to judge him and go, I'll show you issues. You don't know what issues are. But it reminds you of what are issues and what are pitfalls that got in your way as a kid. And then how can you apply that to your life in current day? So even helping somebody with advice or maybe getting a different perspective than what you have, trying to help, then teaches you also. So we are always happy to engage and to answer questions, no matter what kind of questions they are, relative to business or not. Success is success, no matter where it is. If you're an employee and you want to get promoted, I've been promoted at I can't think of a job. I got asked this question on different podcasts, and I can't think of a job of the 20 plus jobs I had that I didn't get promoted at. If I stayed long enough, I always got promoted. So if you have a question about, and then I've had 10,000 employees over the last 20 years. So if you had a question about that, I'm happy to help you. Jerry, I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I'm not looking to get into business myself, but I'm stuck where I am. Here's the reasons why I think I'm stuck. What do you think? And you're going to get just an unvarnished opinion from me about what I think you need to do in order to move up in your company. So it can be business, it can be life, no matter what it is, we want to help is the point that I'm saying. And I think that if people will only put themselves out a little bit and find that mentor and reach out to people and ask questions, I think they will be very surprised at what kind of reaction they get, because rich people aren't the boogeymen. Successful businessmen aren't the boogeymen. They're not as they're portrayed on television. They're not as they're portrayed in movies. It's very different. Most of us, 77% of all all entrepreneurs are self-made. I think it's some 70% of all billionaire list, for at least for the United States, is self-made. That means they came from nothing and grew themselves into something. So we all have that shared experience, generally speaking, of growing up poor and coming through to get where we are today. And if people would only ask, we'd be more than happy to help. So mentors, and don't be afraid to go find one. I'm a big proponent.
Let's talk about your Jerry Brazie site. What is different about this site? What can it help us?
So for me, the web in general, for me has been about getting my name out there, if you will. So let's say a way to put this into perspective is a brand. I'm trying to build a brand. Now, I'm a little bit unique in that I have nothing to sell. I don't want to sell anything. The podcast that we do, the Jerry Brazie podcast and the Jerry Brazie website, my Instagram, you will find that if you're looking to get some advice or get some insight into what business is about or how to go from poor to successful, you're just interested in seeing that, you're going to go to my website, go to my Instagram, and you will see real world examples of that. So what I mean is on my Instagram, what we put up is just kind of my thought of the day, what I'm going through that day, or some experience I had or a conversation I had. We then turn it around and make an Instagram post out of it. So online on our website, you can find all of our content kind of put together at the same place. And what I'm trying to do is inspire people to go above themselves and to realize what's possible, and to let their family and the people around them in the business world and this media and social media, all of the bombardment of things that you get every day that tell you that you can't be successful. We want to show people a different way. And so the brand I'm trying to build is, again, not one that I want to monetize. It's not one that I'm looking to sell anything. There's no books, no courses, no master class. There's none of that I'm doing. There's nothing the matter with any of that. Just that's not for me. My mission here in doing this and spending the time doing this is to get the word out about what's possible, because I'm so passionate about what's possible simply because I lived it. And so I see it in other people. I have a big car collection, Patience, a big car guy. And so I get to have conversations with 25-year-olds, males largely all of the time, because the first question I ever get asked is either how much does the car cost or what do you do for a living? And so rather than answer the question that I'm just a business owner, and then there are assumptions made that I must have, inherited it from my parents or family money type of a thing, I always take the time to say, I was working at McDonald's when I was 16 years old in the drive-thru. In fact, I got asked that question one time in one of my cars in the drive-thru at McDonald's. And I told the guy through the window that I started doing the job that you're doing. So those lessons, I guess, those opinions, those observations that I have are what you will find in everything that's Jerry Brazie. Now, it's unvarnished. So it's 100% the truth. It's 100% what I think, based on my 20 plus years of experience, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, 10,000 plus employees. And I present it all as humbly as I can, just understanding that I believe that these are the realities as I live through them, and we're trying to present them to people to educate them. And what I really want people to hear is what's possible. So if it makes me a little uncomfortable having to talk about my story, but I've gotten over that, and you can go from nothing to something, but this is how it works. It takes a long time to do. It takes decades. It takes dedication. But if you're willing to do it, and you're looking for some guidance on that, or again, be it a promotion at work or going out on your own and starting your own business, JerryBrazie.com has stories and lessons, and the podcast is full of stories and lessons about how you can achieve that.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. So, clan, there will be more from Jerry in a moment. If you are listening on one of the many podcasting platforms rather than my website, and you are encouraged by Jerry's journey, go to onlinesuccessjourney.com for a bonus portion of the interview. The Online Success Journey is a wonderful membership community built for people searching for the path to success. We are one big clan, and you can be part of this community for free. Once you have joined the clan, click on part 2 of Jerry's journey or over 150 other journeys that are available, and learn how you can find the right path for your own online success journey. That's a wrap, clan. Remember, success is a journey. Patience and Jerry.
This is not the end of the journey. We hope you've enjoyed listening to part 1 and want to be sure you know there is a second part to this and every journey podcast at onlinesuccessjourney.com, filled with even more success tips, uplifting stories, and even a bit of fun. There are dozens of episodes only available to the members of the Online Success Journey clan. Check out the website and click on Join the Clan for more information. Patience would like to thank you for listening to this podcast, and she has a free audio gift for you at her website. Go to onlinesuccessjourney.com for instant access to this gift. Of course, you know that listening to the journeys of others helps each of us chart our own path. So make sure you're subscribed to be notified as each new interview is posted. There are so many ways to stay connected to the Online Success Journey and to listen in. And if you're enjoying the podcast, we appreciate your help in telling others. One of the best ways to share the benefit you get is to rate and review it at Stitcher and other sites by clicking the stars or completing the ratings form, by clicking thumbs up and leaving a comment on YouTube, or liking and sharing the podcast on social media. To review the podcast within iTunes, simply open iTunes to the podcast, click on Ratings and Reviews, then write a review. On behalf of Patience, and until next time, thanks once more for listening. It is our hope that this podcast will guide you on your own online success journey.